The subway station at 125th Street was a cavern of echoes, its tiled walls slick with condensation, the air heavy with the scent of damp concrete and stale cigarette smoke. In the heart of Harlem, where New York's pulse beat loudest, the station was a crossroads of the city. Commuters in puffy coats rushing for the A train, street performers strumming battered guitars for spare change, and the ever-present hum of trains rattling through the dark tunnels. On this December night in 2023, the air was frigid. A biting cold that seeped through the station's cracked walls, the wind howling down the entrance stairs like a mournful song, carrying flecks of snow that melted on the grimy floor. Marissa Jones, 45, pulled her scarf tighter around her neck, her breath fogging in the chill, her hands chapped and raw from hours of scrubbing graffiti and mopping spills, the cold a relentless foe that her thin gloves couldn't fend off. A single mother from the Bronx, Marissa had worked the night shift at the MTA for 8 years, her days a relentless cycle of bleach and brooms, her nights spent keeping the station clean while her 2 children, Jaden, 10, and Kayla, 7, slept under her sister's care in their cramped apartment on East 167th Street. Raised in a family of Jamaican immigrants, she'd learned early that survival meant work, not dreams. Her high school diploma a ticket to jobs that paid just enough to keep the lights on, the heat sputtering, the fridge half full. The subway was her domain, its grime and noise a constant, but Marissa moved through it with quiet dignity, her smile a shield against the exhaustion that weighed her down, her faith a flicker in the dark, a whispered prayer each night. Lord, keep my babies safe, help me make it through. Tonight, though, the cold was a beast, the station's ancient heaters wheezing no match for the December wind that sliced through the platforms, the temperature hovering near zero, a cruelty that turned every breath into a shard of ice. Marissa pushed her cleaning cart past a flickering fluorescent light, its buzz a grating companion to the train's distant rumble, her boots squeaking on the wet tiles as she scanned for trash or spills, her back aching from the day's labor. Her fingers numb despite the gloves she'd patched with duct tape. The platform was quieter than usual, the late-night crowd thinning as the clock ticked toward midnight, the A train's departure leaving behind a scattering of stragglers. A busker packing his harmonica, a nurse in scrubs texting furiously, and a few huddled figures who sought refuge in the station's depths, their silhouettes a testament to the city's unseen. She spotted a crumpled McDonald's bag near a bench, its yellow wrapper stark against the gray tiles, and bent to pick it up, her knees protesting, her scarf slipping as she stretched. As she straightened, her gaze landed on a figure slumped on the bench. A man, maybe 60, his body curled against the cold, his thin frame shivering under a tattered sweater, the sleeves frayed, the fabric barely a barrier against the biting air, its faded green pocked with holes. His gray hair was matted under a worn beanie, his face lined with the wear of a hard life, his eyes closed as if sleep could shield him from the cold that turned his breath into shallow, frosty clouds. He had no coat, no blanket, just a plastic bag of belongings clutched in his hands, the knuckles raw and red, cracked from exposure. Marissa paused, her cart creaking to a stop, her breath catching at the sight, a pang in her chest that was both familiar and sharp. The man's shivers echoed her own childhood memories. Nights in a drafty apartment in Flatbush, her mother piling blankets on her and her siblings, the heat cut off for unpaid bills, the cold a silent thief that stole sleep and comfort. She'd seen him before, a regular in the station's shadows, one of the many homeless souls who sought refuge in the subway's depths, their faces a blur of need she couldn't ignore but couldn't fully meet. The others called him Old Man Gray, a quiet figure who never begged, never spoke much, just sat with his head bowed, as if the world had erased him, leaving only a ghost in his place. Her heart clenched, a familiar ache that came from years of seeing the city's underbelly, the faces of those who fell through the cracks, their stories written in the lines of their faces, the weight of their bags. Marissa knew that struggle, the razor's edge of survival. Her own rent was late again, her grocery budget stretched to breaking, her kids' Christmas gifts still unpaid at the layaway counter of a discount store in Morrisania. She reached into her pocket, her fingers brushing the crumpled $20 bill she'd set aside for tomorrow's groceries, the last of her cash until payday. A fragile lifeline for her family. It was enough for milk, bread, maybe some canned soup for Jaden and Kayla, a small buffer against hunger, a promise of a meal to tide them over. But as she looked at the man, his shivers a mirror to her own past, she knew she couldn't walk away, couldn't leave him to the cold that had once haunted her own nights. Marissa glanced at the station's exit, where a 24-hour bodega glowed across the street, its neon sign a beacon in the dark, the words "Open Always" flickering in red and blue. She pushed her cart to the side, securing it with a quick knot around a pole, and hurried out into the night, the wind biting her cheeks, her scarf flapping as she crossed the street, her boots splashing through a puddle that soaked her socks. Inside the bodega, the cashier, a middle-aged Dominican man named Luis, nodded, his face familiar from countless late-night runs for diapers or cough syrup. "Cold out there, huh, Marissa?" he said, ringing up a cheap fleece jacket. $15, a dented clearance item from a bin near the door, and a hot coffee from the machine, the steam rising as he poured, the aroma a small warmth in the fluorescent glow. Marissa handed over her $20, the bill trembling in her hand. Her change, a few crumpled singles she stuffed into her pocket, her mind on the man, not the groceries she'd sacrificed. "Worth it," she muttered, more to herself than to Luis, and hurried back to the station, the jacket and coffee warm against her chest, the wind a howl that couldn't drown her purpose. The man was still on the bench, his shivers more pronounced, his breath shallow as he hugged himself against the cold, his eyes closed, his face a map of exhaustion. Marissa approached softly, her boots quiet on the tiles, and knelt beside him, the coffee's heat seeping through her gloves, a small comfort in her hands. "Hey, sir," she said, her voice gentle, her Jamaican accent a soft lilt, a trace of the island's warmth in her words. "I got you something. It's not much, but it'll help." He opened his eyes, bleary and red, and blinked at her, his gaze sharpening as he took in her uniform, the jacket in her hands, the steam rising from the cup. "What's this?" he said, his voice rough, a gravelly whisper that carried the weight of too many nights on the street, his hands trembling as they reached for the coffee. Marissa smiled, setting the cup on the bench and draping the jacket over his shoulders, the fleece soft against his tattered sweater, its gray fabric a shield against the cold. "A little warmth," she said, her eyes crinkling, her voice steady despite the ache in her knees. "Koi ni kwa jang sing sum, omnya?" "Sorry, think of it as an early Christmas gift. And the coffee's hot. Drink up, okay?" The man stared at her, his hands shaking as he pulled the jacket tighter, the coffee cup warming his fingers as he lifted it, the steam fogging his breath, his eyes glistening with something that might have been tears. "You didn't have to do that," he said, his voice breaking, a raw edge to it that spoke of years without kindness. Nobody does this." Marissa shrugged, standing, her cart creaking as she gripped the handle, her back protesting the movement. "Somebody should," she said, her voice soft but firm, a conviction that had carried her through years of struggle. "Stay warm, all right?" She turned back to her work, the man's quiet "thank you" following her like a whisper, a small light in the station's gloom. She didn't think much of it, her mind already on the next platform, the next mess, the grocery list she'd have to stretch thinner now, beans instead of chicken, bread instead of fruit. But as she mopped a spill near the tracks, the man's face lingered, a reminder of the city's unseen, the ones she couldn't save, but could at least comfort, if only for a night. The next few days were a blur of survival. Marissa's routine, a grind of cleaning, cooking, and coaxing her kids through homework in their cramped apartment, the walls thin enough to hear the neighbors' reggaeton through the plaster. The $20 she'd spent on the man meant skipping meat for the week. Her grocery bag lighter with canned beans, day-old bread, and a dented can of soup, the kind of meal that filled bellies but not hearts. Jaden and Kayla noticed, their questions, "Mom, where's the chicken? Can we have juice?" met with her smile, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "We're saving for Christmas, babies," she said, ruffling Jaden's hair, kissing Kayla's forehead, her heart heavy with the half-truth. She'd make it up to them somehow, with the layaway gifts still waiting at the store. A doll for Kayla, a Lego set for Jaden, their joy a goal that kept her moving. Even as the rent notice on her fridge glared like a silent threat. At the station, the man, Old Man Gray, as the other cleaners called him, returned to his bench each night, the fleece jacket now a constant, his plastic bag of belongings a little fuller, a threadbare blanket tucked inside, perhaps a gift from another kind soul. He nodded to Marissa each time she passed, a silent thank you in his tired eyes, but didn't speak much, his presence a quiet fixture in her routine. A ghost she'd warmed, if only for a moment. She didn't know his story, didn't ask, her own life too heavy with its own unanswered questions. Rent notices piling up like snow, Jaden's school needing new shoes he'd outgrown, Kayla's cough lingering despite the humidifier she couldn't afford to buy. The subway was her battleground, its grime a foe she fought with every swipe of her mop, its cold a reminder of the warmth she longed to give her kids, a warmth that felt further away with each passing day. The first twist came a week later, on a night as cold as the one before, the station's platform slick with melted snow, the air sharp with the promise of more, the wind howling through the entrance like a mourner's wail. Marissa was scrubbing a graffiti tag, NYC Forever, scrawled in garish red across a pillar, her hands stinging from the bleach, her scarf slipping as she worked, when her supervisor, Jamal, a gruff man in his 50s with a soft spot for her work ethic, approached, his clipboard in hand, his expression unreadable under the flickering lights. "Marissa, need you in the office," he said, his voice clipped, a tone that made her stomach drop like a stone into a well. Now. She followed him, her mop abandoned against the pillar, her boots squeaking on the tiles, her mind racing with possibilities, each one a weight on her shoulders. Had she missed a spot? Was she being written up for taking too long on a break? Had someone complained about her cart blocking the platform? The office, a cramped room near the station's control booth, smelled of burnt coffee and ink, its walls plastered with schedules, union notices, and a faded MTA poster about fare evasion. Jamal sat at his desk, a laptop open, its screen casting a blue glow, but it was the woman beside him who caught Marissa's eye. A white woman in her 30s, her auburn hair pulled back in a low ponytail. Her blazer crisp over a turtleneck, a journalist's notebook in hand, her pen poised like a weapon. "Marissa Jones?" the woman said, standing, her handshake firm, her blue eyes bright with a quiet intensity. "I'm Sarah Kim with the New York Times. I'd like to talk about what you did last week." Marissa blinked, her hands clasped, her uniform suddenly feeling too small for the moment, the navy fabric stained with bleach spots that seemed to mock her. "What I did?" she said, her voice soft, her Jamaican accent a lilt as she glanced at Jamal, who nodded, a rare smile breaking through his gruff exterior, his eyes crinkling with something like pride. "The guy on the bench," Jamal said, leaning back in his chair, his clipboard resting on his lap. "The one you gave the coat to? Turns out he's not just some homeless guy." Sarah took over, her voice warm but professional, her notebook open to a page with a photo clipped to it. A man, clean-shaven in a suit, his gray hair neatly combed, a stark contrast to the figure Marissa knew. "His name is Henry Grayson," she said, tapping the photo, her pen scratching a quick note. "He used to be a senior editor at the Times, won a Pulitzer in the 90s for his investigative work on political corruption. A few years ago he lost everything, divorce, debt, a breakdown, and ended up on the streets. He's been living anonymously, working on a book about urban alienation, the way society turns its back on the vulnerable. Until last week, when you gave him that coat and coffee." Marissa's breath caught, her mind flashing to the man's shivering form. His tattered sweater, the $20 she'd spent without a second thought, the last of her cash handed over in a bodega's fluorescent glow. I didn't know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her hands trembling as she sat. the chair creaking under her weight, her scarf slipping to her lap. I just saw him cold. I couldn't leave him like that. Not in this weather. Sarah nodded, her pen pausing, her gaze softening as she looked at Marissa, seeing not just a janitor but a woman whose kindness had pierced a city's armor. He told me about you, she said, her voice gentle, a smile tugging at her lips. Said it was the first time in years he felt seen, not as a ghost but as a person. He wrote about it, an op-ed published yesterday. It's gone viral on Twitter, #kindnessmatters. People are calling you a hero, Marissa. Jamal slid a tablet across the desk, the article glowing on the screen, its headline bold. A Coat in the Cold, One Woman's Kindness in a City That Forgets, by Henry Grayson. Marissa scanned it, her eyes blurring as she read Henry's words, each one a weight that pressed against her heart. She didn't know my name, my past, my pain. She saw a man shivering, and she gave what she had, her last $20, a cup of coffee, a moment of dignity. In a city that moves too fast to care, Marissa Jones stopped. She reminded me what humanity looks like. The article had thousands of shares, comments flooding in. This is the New York I want to believe in. She deserves the world. I cried reading this. A photo accompanied the piece, a grainy shot Henry had taken with his phone. Marissa kneeling by the bench, her face soft with kindness, the jacket draped over his shoulders, a moment of grace captured in the station's harsh light. Marissa's hands shook, her throat tight, tears spilling as she set the tablet down, her scarf slipping to the floor, her uniform a shroud she suddenly wanted to shed. I didn't do it for this, she said, her voice cracking, her hands wiping her eyes, the tears hot against her cold skin. I couldn't let him freeze. That's all. Sarah smiled, closing her notebook, her voice a lifeline in the cramped office. I know, she said. That's why it matters. And it's why I'm here. There's more. The second twist came 2 days later. As Marissa sat in her apartment, the radiator hissing weakly against the cold, Jaden and Kayla sprawled on the couch with a library book, their laughter a rare balm against the stress of the week. The article had spread like wildfire, trending on Twitter for days. #kindnessmatters. A rallying cry for New Yorkers hungry for hope in a city that often felt like a machine. Strangers had sent letters to the station, some with small donations. $5, $10. A child's drawing of a subway train with a stick figure, Marissa holding a heart. Each one a testament to her impact. A pile of kindness she kept in a shoebox under her bed, overwhelmed by the attention. Her focus remained on her kids, on the rent notice still taped to her fridge, the grocery list she'd stretched with beans and rice, the Christmas gifts she still couldn't fully pay off. Their joy, a goal that felt just out of reach. The call came from a number she didn't recognize, the voice on the other end crisp but warm. A woman named Claire from the Urban Hope Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting working families in New York. Ms. Jones, Claire said, her tone professional but kind. We read about you in the Times. Your story moved us, and we'd like to help. We're offering a grant. $10,000 to cover your kids' school expenses, clothes, anything they need. And we'd like to offer you a position with us, Community Outreach Coordinator, full-time, with benefits. It pays $50,000 a year, plus health insurance for you and your children. Would you be interested? Marissa's breath caught, her hands trembling as she gripped the phone, her eyes darting to Jaden and Kayla, their laughter fading as they looked up, sensing her shift, their library book slipping to the floor. Yes, she said, her voice breaking, tears spilling down her cheeks as she clutched the receiver, her scarf falling to her lap, her uniform a relic of a life she could finally leave behind. Yes, I'm interested. The weeks that followed were a transformation, a seismic shift that Marissa felt in her bones, as if the city itself had exhaled, its weight lifting from her shoulders. The grant paid off the layaway gifts, Jaden and Kayla's squeals on Christmas morning, a memory she'd hold forever, a doll for Kayla, a Lego set for Jaden, their joy a light that filled the apartment, chasing away the shadows of want. It covered new shoes, winter coats, a month's rent, easing the knot in Marissa's chest, the fridge now stocked with chicken, juice, the things her kids had missed. The job at Urban Hope was a revelation. Days spent organizing food drives, connecting families to resources, her voice a bridge between need and help. Her nights no longer spent mopping subway floors, but reading to her kids, their heads on her lap, their future brighter than she'd dared dream. Henry Grayson became a friend. His book, Invisible Cities, A Journey Through America's Shadows, dedicated to Marissa, her act of kindness, its opening chapter. A bestseller that funded his own recovery. A small apartment in Queens where he could write again. He visited her at Urban Hope's office one day, his fleece jacket still a constant, his eyes brighter, his gray hair neat under a new cap. "You gave me more than a coat," he told her, his voice steady, his hand on hers, the warmth a mirror to that December night. "You gave me a reason to keep going, to tell the stories that matter." One snowy evening, as Marissa stood at the 125th Street station, no longer a janitor but a visitor, the platform bustling with the city's heartbeat, she felt a shift, a clarity born of struggle and grace. The station's cold was the same, the tiles still cracked, the wind still howling, but she was not. Her coat new, a bright red wool that Kayla had picked out, her kids safe and warm at home, her heart full. The article, the grant, Henry's words, they were threads in a tapestry of kindness, woven by a single act. A $20 bill that had changed everything, a spark that had lit up the dark. The city pulsed around her, its lights a constellation of dreams and struggles, its hum a promise of stories yet to tell. Marissa Jones, daughter of the Bronx, once a cleaner in the shadows, was now a beacon, her kindness a flame that warmed more than one cold night.